Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I want to address a couple of misconceptions that people either have coming into the knife world or develop as they're just starting to learn that are fine, and certainly, don't feel bad if you have these misconceptions, but your life tends to be a little bit better once you're able to move past them and understand the world in a little bit of a better way. So I just kind of want to dive into it. Experienced knife people, a lot of this probably isn't going to be news, and although there are certainly level and nuances, and if you disagree with something I said or want to add something, feel free to down in the comments below, but these are little things that a lot of folks kind of have trouble with, and so let's go on ahead and jump into it and address some very common misconceptions people come into the knife world with, or develop along the way. One of the first roads people go down as they get into the hobby is, oh my God, steel is the most important thing. And absolutely 100%, the steel of a knife is important because it gives you valuable characteristics. It gives you things like the toughness of a steel. It gives you stainlessness. It gives you edge holding, and even sharpenability. All of those different things are very, the steel choice there has a strong effect on those things. And certainly, bad steel is important. If you are using bad steel, you will not be able to get great performance. You won't be able to get a great edge, etc. If you're using things like 3CR, 4CR, or something like that, if you're using surgical stainless, which isn't really a thing, that's just, we don't want to tell you what the steel is because you'll laugh. So they put surgical stainless on the outside there. There are lots of bad steels out there in the world, but by and large, most modern pocket knives are pretty much good to go. And you'll get a really good selection of steels that are really good to go, that are excellent. You get things like 20 CV in this TRM atom. That's a great steel, or its very close chemical brother, M390, shown here in a CRKT home front and titanium edition. You get S30V, which is sort of a very well-known steel here, and it's absolutely good to go for everyday carry in this Benchmade 940. S35VN in this Chris Reeves Shabazz, small Shabazz in this case. S90V is an amazing steel in this Spyderco Native 5 right here. Then you get like XHP, CTS XHP. This is another pretty well-known steel and a very common steel, and that absolutely is a great performer of daily life. And then on the budget side, sort of the most predominant budget steel these days is D2. And D2 is absolutely a solid steel. It's a little less stainless than some, but you know what? That's okay. At least for most people's use, it's absolutely fine, and it will work. And then you get some more esoteric sorts of things. You get M4, which is maybe not that esoteric, as seen here on a Spyderco Advocate with a Flip It Elite here, but nonetheless, you get things like that, and then you get some really fancy stuff. You get like Maximet, which is a very, very, very high edge retention sort of steel. Edge retention, edge holding, that's a weird term anyways. And then if you want stainlessness, you might get something like Vanax, as pictured on this quiet carry waypoint here, and then LC200N, which is yet another steel that just won't rust. We'll talk about that in a bit, but anyways, there are lots of great steels out there. But the thing is, there is more to life than the identity of a steel, because even if you have the right steel chemistry, even if it's the right chemicals, so to speak, it can be done poorly, because the heat treat is very important. If a company doesn't really do a good job of treating that steel, it doesn't matter whether they're using M390, it doesn't matter if they're using 20CV, it's still going to be bad, right? Good cutting edge geometry is really important. You want to find a knife that is very thin behind that edge, that is able to come to a very acute point, because that'll just make it cut a whole lot better. And frankly, that'll probably have a bigger experience on your daily cutting tasks or a bigger effect, that is, than anything else. You want to find knives that don't have blade stock that's amazingly thick. If it's a half-inch thick, you're never going to get it through a cardboard box effectively. All the steel in the world ain't going to save you. And then you want to make sure there aren't things like other obstructions in the blade path. Look, there is a lot that goes into a good cutting performer, and steel's a part of it, but it's not the whole. Similarly, you want to be careful with it. There's a whole group that has basically made claims that the hardness of the steel, the HRC, the Rockwell hardness, is the one true factor as you're evaluating steels. And certainly, again, hardness plays a strong role. But it's always a reality. It's always a reality of balancing different factors. Hardness is important, but if your hardness isn't good, well, that might mean easier sharpenability, etc. So there's always this balance here, and overfitting to one number, saying, I just want the highest hardness possible, is not necessarily the way to go through life. You want good hardness for better longer-term edge holding, but there's a lot more to steel than that number. So my advice to you in the steel world is to learn more. Learn about metallurgy. Listen to a lot of sources out there. Read blogs like Knife Steel Nerds. He's an incredible guy, Laren Thomas. You get a whole bunch of good information about how steel actually performs out on the internet, and it's better to think about that kind of thing rather than getting fixated on one number. Rather getting fixated on 20 CV, M390, 290, it must be good. Or, oh my God, what's the hardness? No, there are lots of factors here. So focus on that first. Next up. Next misconception is that Damascus steels, or pattern-welded steels, cut better, so you want that for your everyday knife. So let's talk about what that means for a second. This is a ProTech Malibu with a Damascus blade. What we see here are two different steels that have been folded together. One shows up lighter here because it's more stainless, and the other one shows up darker because it's less stainless. And so they mix these two steels together at a forge, basically, and get a pretty pattern out of it. And then when you etch it, one of the steels turns a little darker, one of them turns a little lighter. And that's a really cool thing, but you end up with a steel that looks very complicated as opposed to a single chemical steel. Like, for instance, in this little guy, which is just one big chunk of Maximate, Damascus steels have multiple steels pattern welded together. And Damascus is not a brand, and it's not just made in Damascus Syria. In fact, the majority of modern Damascus isn't. There may be somebody making Damascus in Damascus, but it doesn't find its way into steels these days, at least here in 2020. But the thing is, there are many different kinds, there are many different brands of it. For instance, Damasteel is a company based out of Sweden. They made the steel right here. This is a Damasteel, as is the handle on this guy. This is a Holt Knife Spectre. This is an Alamic Busker, and they made the steel for this blade here, which is a very tight twist pattern Damascus. But both of those are made by one company out there in Sweden called Damasteel. But there are other companies out there making it. We can see here that this is a very, very different looking Damascus, but it is still clearly a pattern welded steel on here. And then there are lots of makers out there who are doing their own Damascus. This right here is being made by, this is a custom knife by a guy named Micho, and it has an incredible Damascus pattern. And it's his own thing, and as is the Damascus down here. So there are lots of different kinds of Damascus out there, and so it's not really fair to say, oh, Damascus is any one thing. And although it's worth pointing out, by the way, that these are all modern Damascus steels, and the component steels in them are quite good, there are definitely bad Damascus out there. If you go to a flea market and you find a Damascus knife, chances are you're not going to get great performance. Like I said in the last one, chemical is on everything, but really bad steel. If the two component steels are both trash, guess what? Mix them together, it's still going to be trash. So the thing is, Damascus is definitely a beautiful thing, but it doesn't mean it's the best performer. If I want a knife that is just going to perform and perform and perform and cut and hold that edge and be super tough, chances are what I'm going to go for is a more modern steel. I'm going to go for something that is a, beautiful particle metallurgy style steel out there, something like an M4, like an S90V, a 20CV. But the Damascus stuff is beautiful. And so if you're looking for aesthetics, Damascus is a great choice. But if you're looking for raw performance, in 2020, it can be bested by some of our other modern steels. So buy Damascus because it's pretty, not because it's going to be necessarily any functionally better. Although, again, it can be very, very good. Let's move on to the next one. The next set of misconceptions has to do with stainlessness, with rust-proofness, etc. Now, certainly, there are knife steels out there that are not at all stainless. Things like carbon steels, in a lot of your traditional stuff, as well as like 1095 tool steel, those will rust. There is absolutely no question about that. In fact, there are modern steels that are used in modern knives that are less rust-proof. For instance, D2 is a very common budget-style steel these days, and it is a steel that will absolutely rust, as will M4 right here. This is another steel that I very much like, but given the opportunity, it will take on some corrosion. That is a thing that you have to worry about with it. Then there are modern steels that are a little bit more stain resistant. Something like 20CV or M390 is going to be relatively stain resistant, meaning that certainly it can rust. If you drop it in the salt water, it's going to rust out after a little while, but for the most part, it's going to be good to go in your everyday life. You don't really need to worry too much about rust with it. Everybody always, the joke is, no, stainless steel just means it stains less. And that's by and large true, right? You have to take care of your stuff. You can't just leave it in the bottom of your canoe and expect it not to rust out. But this gives rise to another very common misconception, which is that, no, all knife steels rust. There is no avoiding rust. And actually, that's not quite true either, because there is a class of steels that flat out will not rust. One of them is LC200N. This is a steel it's also known as Z-Finite. It's a great steel. It's actually an amazing all-around steel. I am a big fan of LC200N generally, and this is the Spyderco Siren. By the way, I'm sorry. No, this is the Waterway. The Siren is the folding version of it. But anyways, LC200N is a really, really nice steel because it flat out will not rust. This was designed by an ocean kayaker, not the steel, but the knife itself. And, you can just leave it in the ocean. It will be fine. This will not rust, yet it is still a very nice steel. Similarly, this is Vanax. Vanax Super Clean. You'll also see it. This is the Quiet Carry Waypoint. again, will not rust. I tested this guy. I left it in my shower 4 weeks, throwing salt at it every so often. And guess what? Not even a scratch. Not even, well, it wouldn't have scratched. It would have rusted. Not even a rust. So this is a very, very good steel. An excellent steel, as a matter of fact, but it just won't rust. Maybe there is some element of chemistry that I could do to throw at this to make these corrode somehow, but it's not going to come up in your everyday life, even if you are a fisherman out at sea. H1 steel is another steel that has historically been used in rust-resistant contexts, and you know what? It works fine. It, too, doesn't rust at all. It tends to have lesser edge-holding performance, and so I tend to recommend LC200N of Vanax if you're looking for strong rust resistance, but that's another option out there. And then there are things that aren't steels. This right here is a tungsten carbide blade by a group named Sandrine. They're the only folks making tungsten carbide blades at the moment, but they're really, really nice. They have amazing edge holding, that kind of thing, and they also happen to be completely unable to corrode. And so if you need something that is completely uncorrodable, that's an option too. So certainly it's the case that stainless just means that it stains less, but at the same time, there are some kinds of blade steels that just mean that rust isn't going to be a thing. So if you find yourself carrying more conventional steels and they're, rusting up on you on a regular basis, because maybe you're in a super humid area, you're on a fishing boat or something, then it might be worth thinking about going to something even a little bit more stainless than that. So there you go. Another common misconception people have is that more expensive is necessarily better in the pocket knife game, and that's certainly not true. I mean, there is a level of cost at which the resulting gear is bad. Under $20, well, let's put it this way, you're getting gas station knives. There are a couple of exceptions to that, like the Open L and such like that, but the fact is, if you're not paying if you're under $20, chances are you're not getting anything really worth a damn. And in fact, I would sort of argue that the place where you should probably start spending money is like $30 or $40. Something like this. This is the Ontario Rat number 2. This is one of my very favorite budget-focused knives because, frankly, this could be enough. For my everyday life, this could be my last pocket knife, and it would work, right? There would be some things I miss. The construction isn't going to be as nice as some of the higher-end pieces that I love, and it doesn't have some of the same fancitude, but it is an amazing piece, 100%. And the amount of jump that I get, and this is the curve of diminishing returns here all again, but the amount of jump you get from junk, there we go, to something like this is a huge jump up. As you go up to $90, you get some improvements in materials. You get some improvements in ergonomics, fit and finish, things like that. As you go up to $140, you're getting better materials still. You're getting better improved, nicer, smoother actions. You can get some amazing designs. This is a Spyderco paramilitary. This is the Doug Ritter RSK by Hogue, mini RSK that is. This is the Spyderco Chaparral lightweight here. You can get up to the Para 2, which is paramilitary Military 2 by Spyderco, an absolutely amazing knife, sort of a genre-defining knife, and frankly, all the knife that most people could need, or you could get to this guy. This is the TRM Atom, the Three Rivers Manufacturing Atom, and frankly, if I weren't unreasonable, this could be my last knife. That could be all the knife that I would need in the world, and yet it's not because I'm crazy. But all of these knives here are under about $200, and the fact is, for $200, you can get all the knife that you would need for it. You could get a lifetime knife. I could stop under that price point and be a perfectly happy man if I weren't just a little bit unreasonable. But when you go higher than that, when you leave this $200 range, certainly you're getting little improvements. But the curve of diminishing returns means those improvements are going to be relatively small, and they're not generally in the functional domain. When you go higher than that, you get something like beauty. You get a knife that is absolutely gorgeous, even if functionally speaking, it's not so different than the stuff lower than it. You're getting little bits of hand improvement. You're getting things like hand engraving right here in this Protec Sprint, which is absolutely gorgeous, but not necessarily a functional improvement. You're getting nice fit and finish. You're getting nice little touches here. You're getting specific materials, etc. Like in this Alamic Whippersnapper. You're getting manufacturing. You're getting made in the USA, for instance. Although actually these three are all made in the USA as well. So is this guy. So yeah, so is this actually. So, but you're able to pay for other kinds of things. Like this is the Chris Reeve Shabazz. It's a standard within the knife world. It's sort of a cultural touchstone piece. And so you're getting other things, but it's not necessarily a functional thing. So don't feel like, if your budget is limiting you to the lower end, so to speak, don't feel like you're missing out on huge functional pieces. You can get all the function you need for under $200 and leave the high end to the fancy stuff. There's a lot of joy up here. I spend a lot of time up here, but that doesn't mean that you're getting something that is functionally better or that you're missing out on day-to-day performance if you stop at a more reasonable range. So there you go. The next big misconception that a lot of people develop is that custom means the same thing as amazing. So custom knives can be great. I have some custom knives. In fact, these are the 3 full-on custom knives that I have. These are custom knives that are not really production. They're made by one person substantially. This is the FK5 by Hiroaki Oda. This is the Winter Blade Cofactor. And this is the Enrique Pena Front Flipper Trapper custom version. These are my 3 custom knives. I have some other customized knives, like this customized Protec Sprint, my Holt Spectre that I've been showing off. But the fact is that these 3 are actually customs. What custom means, I really wish that if you go to the custom knives area of like a major blade show, that every one of them in the custom area would be amazing. That like if every custom knife was great, that would be a wonderful world. But in practice, what custom really means is that this was made by one person. This was a batch of one. And the thing is, that can be amazing. And there were lots of great custom knives out there. There were some amazing pieces that you look at, you handle them, and it's like it restores your faith in humanity as craftsmen. Things like that, craftspeople, I suppose. Like the front flipper trapper here is just an amazing knife. Flat out, there's every part of this, the smoothness, every damn part of it's great. And so this is a kind of custom that makes me think, wow, custom knives can be incredible. Or maybe it's something that's so unique and weird that no one else is freaking doing it. Like this Winter Blade Co, no one else does it, and therefore it's custom, and therefore it's the only way to go. Or maybe it's something that is relatively simple, like this Oda, but it also has elements of mastery, and it's got elements of the handmadeness to it that still make it amazing. So there are lots of reasons to buy a custom knife, but the thing is they are not universally so good, because you can get a one-off piece from somebody who's amazing, but also on sale there are one-off pieces from people who are just getting started, from people who are just struggling with the details a little bit, or maybe people who are making the very best knife that they can, but maybe that's not quite up to the standards of modern production pieces out there. In fact, I have a whole video about this that goes a little bit deeper into this. Nowadays, production knives, particularly in the higher end price brackets, around $300, $400, $500, very often will have the same fit and finish, if not better, relative to a lot of the customs, and even relative to some of the high-end custom knives. And in fact, it is a very rare maker, and I would put Pena in that category, who can outperform high-end production houses, right? And when those folks come about, their work tends to be very hard to find and very expensive. So as a result, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of custom knife makers out there in the world, and just the fact that it's a custom knife doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be an amazing one. So do your homework. Learn about these people. Talk to people. Look at owners. Look at videos, etc. Try and figure out exactly what's going on there. Go to shows is the very best thing you can do. That way you can handle their stuff and go like, wow, that's amazing. I want to own one of their pieces. And then, get in line, make informed decisions, but realize that custom is not necessarily the same thing as amazing, even though in many, many cases it absolutely can be. And actually, this brings us to our next point. Another of the major disappointments that people often face as they get into the knife world is availability. Because as you're first building your passion, as you're looking out at the blogosphere, you're watching videos, you're looking at Instagram, you might see a piece and you're like, oh my God, yes, I want that. Maybe it's because it's perfect for you. Maybe it's because everyone's talking about it, but it's very easy to feel like, yes, I need to get me one of those. And so that everyone's like, okay, take my money. Somebody, who's got it for sale? And then you look, and then you look, and then you look, and you look, and you realize, oh, wait, no one does. I can't buy that knife, and that's very, very sad. In fact, one thing that all of these knives on the table right now have in common is that they are very, very difficult to get. In several cases, the makers are making them as quickly as they can. There's just more demand than there is supply, like the North Arm Scar Hatu, the TRM Atom, the Protec Malibu, even the Quiet Carry Waypoint. They're going as quickly as they can, but right now, demand has massively outstripped the supply. In other cases, like the Demco 8020, this is a relatively new knife, and right now, all the capacity is getting bought up like that. I imagine they'll equalize after a while. They'll be easier to get a hold of, but at the moment, this one can be a little hard to get just because it's relatively new. In some cases, it was a limited edition, like this particular version of this is the Shot by Design Void. This is a Knife Nuts podcast edition of the knife, and it's absolutely gorgeous with the Damascus inlays and things like that, but unfortunately, it was a part of a limited edition, so this particular variety, I think they only made 20 of them. So if you want this particular knife, you're going to have to find 1 or 20 people and convince them to part with it, and by the way, No, sorry. And then sometimes you're in the middle of a hype cycle. So, like, the Holt Spectre is a knife that is both amazing and amazingly hyped right now. So it's the case that even if you have your wallet open, you're not going to be able to find one of these because they're going to be really, really tough. If the Holt's release something, there's a line of people out the door trying to get one. Same thing with Pena knives. It's very, very difficult to get one of his pieces right now because, well, he's in a lot of demand, right? And so both of these makers end up with a very thriving aftermarket set of scalpers and things like that. And so, unfortunately, particularly with really excellent work, whether production or custom, it's a truth of the knife world that some of the very best stuff is hard to get. Mind you, there's also a lot of junk that's hard to get, so don't let that lead you down the way. And there are gems that have been around long enough to meet the demand. I mean, for a while there, the Spyderco Paramilitary 2 was hard to get, just because, oh my God, this is a great piece. Now they've caught up with it. Now you can just order one, but for a while, that was difficult. But the thing is, this is just a fact of life. It's a part of the circle of life. And so if you're looking for something, first check your retailer's of choice. And then look around. Google it. See if you can find another dealer who's got a couple of them. Check the maker's website. The thing is, if nothing's around to buy and everyone's talking about it, it's probably sold out. Or maybe it's waiting for the next drop. As is the case with the quiet carry here, I'm sure there are going to be more of them. It's just waiting for the next batch to be made, right? The factory schedules and things like that. But the very best plan, if you're looking for something, if you're like, oh my God, I need to get myself an 80-20. The very first thing you do is you follow Demko Knives on Instagram and you see what's going on there. You figure out do they have an Instagram page? Do they have a Facebook group? Do they have a website? Check that out. And then just figure out how pieces are being made available. In this case, I think a lot of them are going to dealers directly. But in other cases, they're maybe being done through auctions or through first come, first serve on their website or something like that. Or they're doing gradual drops, as I know TRM is. But figure out what that looks like. Or if it's a smaller maker, somebody that you're interested in their work, but they're not like hugely hyped or anything like that, you check their website or Instagram. See if they've got a process to get on their books, so to speak, where you can get in line for that. And often you'll end up waiting 6 or 8 months. Maybe sometimes you'll end up waiting. I mean, there are makers out there whose books are 8 years deep, right? But after a while, your number will come up and you'll get a chance to actually purchase one of those things. So see where they post them and then sit there and wait patiently. But the fact is, right now, you shouldn't be surprised if you can't find an in-demand knife at table price to order right now. And by table price, I mean the price that the maker is actually selling them at. So hang out, get in line, and just kind of calm your pivots. Hang out there and say, okay, I want a Spectre. I'll see if there's a Spectre around, but yeah. The one thing I do want to say is please, please, please resist the urge to support the scalpers who buy in-demand pieces and then jack up the price immediately after that to make a buck. Because although certainly it's an approach they can take, giving those folks money only makes that problem worse for next round because more people are going to be like, wow, if I sign up and I get one, even if I don't want the knife, I'll be able to make some money. So don't feed the parasites, please. But nonetheless, just hang out, get in line, calm your pivots, and wait, because sooner or later, you'll be able to pick up the thing that you're after. So, yeah, availability is a problem. Sorry about that. Then finally, I think the biggest mistake that some people make is they're getting into the cutlery hobby, or frankly any hobby, is that they're getting all their information from one place. Look, as a human, generally speaking, you should never get all your information from one place, right? If you're getting all your news from one channel, you're not really getting the news. Similarly, if you're getting all of your knowledge about knives from one person, from one forum, from one etc., that's not necessarily a great approach, because the thing is, I'm a big fan of watching reviews, big fan of reading reviews, and I'm also super biased there. But the fact is, there are so many great reviewers working. There were so many great people talking about knives, talking about knife engineering, talking about knife steel, talking about all of these various things, that it's a really good idea to spread your information around, so to speak. Don't just watch one person. Because the fact is, there are many different types of knife user in the world. There are folks like myself who tend to prefer smaller pieces, who tend to prefer pieces that are a little bit more pocket jewelry, although not certainly, I got my exceptions too. But there are many different uses in the world. There are many different users in the world, and there are many different worldviews. There are many different approaches to pocket knife out there. And so every person who is writing a review, who's writing an article, who's writing a forum post is biased. This is another fundamental fact of life. Everybody is biased, especially me. I am super duper biased, partly intellectually, partly just I got small hands, right? There are biases out there in the world. And so part of knowing the landscape well is understanding whose biases as reviewers, as writers, as forums mesh mesh well with your own. If you find somebody out there who's like, okay, this person by and large has the same bias as I do, that might be somebody you watch more often, but it's still a good idea to look around a little bit more. Understand whose needs, whose lifestyle matches well with yours, but also get other perspectives. So if you're making a big purchase, or if you're just trying to learn more about the field, look around, get a bunch of perspectives, find a number of folks. Check my EDC channels playlist on YouTube here. I've got a link to some of my very favorite channels out there, but find a number of folks, then make up your mind for yourself. Reviews give you individual data points, but only you can make the decision, and the only way to do that is by looking at a bunch of different people's views and then getting a sense from all of those exactly what the truth might look like for you and for your life. So anyways, there you go. I hope this has helped you a little bit, maybe avoid some misconceptions, or at the very least, it's given you something to yell at me in the comments for. But yeah, I hope this has been interesting to you, and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day. Bye now.